Welcome to this WiseOwl tutorial on getting started with SQL Server Integration Services. Here's what you'll learn in the tutorial. I'll begin by looking at using Visual Studio. So we'll look at how to load SQL Server Integration Services and the various options there are, and how to customize settings within Visual Studio to make it easier to use. We'll then go on to look at creating a project and package within SSIS. So firstly by creating a project and a package itself, then within the package creating control flow tasks to monitor flow of execution for the package, creating data tasks with a source and a destination, and finally how to run a package to import data from a SQL Server table into an Excel workbook. So let's begin. In order to be able to create projects in integration services, I need to be able to load Visual Studio. And I can do that in a couple of ways depending on which version of SQL Server I've got installed. So if I go to the Start menu and go to Programs, I can find SQL Server 2012, and within that there'll be an icon called SQL Server Data Tools, and what that will do is load up Visual Studio 2012. But alternatively, if I'm still using SQL Server 2008 Release 2, I can find the icon called SQL Server Business Intelligence Development Studio, and because that's a bit of a mouthful, most people tend to abbreviate it to BIDS. And although that will load up Visual Studio 2008, which sounds like it's all very different, in practice it's virtually indistinguishable from SQL Server Data Tools. But I'll go for the latest one, SQL Server Data Tools, and what this will do is load up Visual Studio 2010. And as you can see, the first thing it does is load the start page. Now, what I would much rather see is the thing I was just working with. So the first thing I'm going to do is reconfigure Visual Studio to tell it that when I next go into Visual Studio, it should display the project I was last working with. And I can do that by choosing Tools from the menu, then choosing Options, going to the Environment tab and choosing the Startup tab, and changing it so at Startup, instead of choosing the start page, it chooses to load the last loaded solution, which is, in my opinion, a much better option. So I'm going to choose OK to confirm that, and then I'll close down my start page because I don't really like it. There's also a window appeared for getting started in SSIS, so I'm going to close that down, and in fact I'm also going to close down my toolbox, because while this is useful for other Visual Studio applications, it's actually completely irrelevant for integration services and quite confusing. SSIS does have its own toolbox, as we'll see shortly, but this isn't it. So I've got a fairly blank window. What I'm now going to do is display the two most important windows in integration services, and they are Solution Explorer and the Properties window. So let's start with Solution Explorer. If I choose View from the menu and choose Solution Explorer, then it opens up, in my case, on the right hand side. Now, like all windows in Visual Studio, it's got a pin at the top right, and this can be in one of two positions, horizontal, as there, or vertical. When it's vertical, you can dock the window anywhere you like on screen, so you can drag it round and position it on any one of these arrows, and what it will do is dock at the top, or the left, or the bottom, or the right of your Visual Studio window. So I'm going to keep mine on the right hand side because I'm a creature of habit, and that's where I always put it. And I'm now going to click on that pin again to make it horizontal so that it auto hides the window. And an auto hiding window is good news because it doesn't take up any of the screen unless you actually move your mouse over it, and then you can see its contents. So I'll just display the Properties window to go alongside it, which will be useful later on. And I'm going to dock that as well on the right hand side and then auto hide it. So I've got my two main windows visible, and it's time now to create a project. But just before I do that, let's have a look at what the project is going to do. In SQL Server Management Studio, I've got a table of countries, and you can see it contains 8 countries, and for each there's a country ID and a country name. And what my project is going to do is to export these into an Excel workbook so that I can use them. Now there's easier ways to do this, I'll be the first to admit. Copying and pasting springs to mind. And this is a bit of a sledgehammer to crack a nut, but it does illustrate how to create basic integration services projects. So the first thing I'm going to do is go back to Visual Studio, and what I need to do is to create a new project to hold my package, which will do all my data import, manipulation and export. To create a new project, you can choose File from the menu, then choose New, and then choose to create a project. And it depends what sort of person you are, what you do next. If you're a C# programmer, you'll doubtless create a Windows Forms or WPF application, or an ASP.NET website. If you're a VB programmer or Visual Basic programmer, you'll do the same thing in Visual Basic. But we're data analysts, so we'll create a business intelligence project, whether for analysis services cubes, reporting services reports, or as in our case, integration services, which will allow us, as it says on the right, to extract, transform and load data. And I'm going to call my project My Project and then choose OK. So what integration services will do is firstly load up a window called Getting Started in SSIS, which I'm going to close down because I assume you're watching this project so you can avoid that. And it will also create the SSIS toolbox, which I referred to earlier, so that's going to be useful later. So we've got our package visible on screen, and it's got two main windows. It's got the control flow, which you use for creating flowchart type diagrams, explaining in what order the various parts of your package will execute. And it's got the data flow, which allows you to create data tasks, which is, you can think of as like controlling a river of data, controlling the order in which it runs through your package. If you've ever had a marble run as a child, imagine a marble run full of data instead of marbles, and you'll have roughly the right idea. So I'm going to go back to my control flow, and I'm going to create two tasks. What I want my package to do when I run it is firstly to display a message saying welcome to this package, or something similar, and then to actually import the data from the SQL Server table into the Excel workbook. So for the first task, I'm going to go on the left hand side to the common tasks and find a script task and click on that and drag it where I want it to go. And what Visual Studio will do is create the task, which it will call script task, and there's always a little icon displayed to the left of that which shows what sort of task it is. In this case it's denoting this is going to be a script written in either Visual Basic or C#. So I'm going to rename that, and I'm going to call it display reassuring message. The only reason I've included this task is just to illustrate that you can have more than one thing in the control flow. My second task is going to be a data flow task, so I can click on that and drag it in. You'll notice data flow tasks are so common that they're in the favorites at the top of the SSIS toolbox. So if I drag that in to my control flow window and position it where I want it to go, and I'm going to rename this again by clicking once on it, and I'm going to call this import countries into Excel and then press return. If I then click back on the first task, you'll see there's a green arrow coming out of it. And this is called a precedence constraint. And what I'm going to do is drag that green arrow on top of the second task, so to ensure that the two tasks execute one after the other. And if I click off that, it's actually easier to read. And that green arrow will stay visible no matter where I move these two tasks to. So that completes for the moment my control flow, except that my script doesn't actually do anything. So the next thing to do is to configure this script task so that it does what it says it does on the tin and displays a reassuring message. In order to be able to edit my script task, I need to double click on it. And what that will do is bring up the Script Task Editor dialog box, which allows me to edit the script. And I can do that by clicking on the button at the bottom right corner of the screen. But just before I do that, I've got a choice to make. Do I create my script in Visual Basic, or do I create it in C#? Microsoft seems to think C# is more common in the world, and I think I'll probably agree with them. So somewhat reluctantly, I'm going to go with the default choice and click on the Edit Script button. What's happening now is Visual Studio is creating a completely separate project just to contain this script. You can see the project's name is, I won't bother reading it out, but it's clearly been generated by a computer. And it's created a script called scriptmain.cs. Now, later in another tutorial, I'll explain more about what this is actually doing. For the moment, suffice it to say that there's a program, a function called main, which is going to run, which is going to return the fact that the script has been a success. And all I need to do is add a line into this to display my message. And I can do that by typing in messagebox.show, open brackets, and then in double inverted commas, I can put the text I want to display. So I'm going to say about to import data, which I think will reassure my user. And C# being C#, I need to put a semicolon to end the line. All I'm going to do now is to close down this project entirely by clicking on the cross at the top right. When I choose OK, it will save that script attached to that task, and had I made any mistakes, they would show up with a warning icon on screen. But nothing like that has happened, so it looks like it's all going to work OK. Now, I'm nearly ready to do my data import, but just before I do that, one more thing. Let's add an annotation to my diagram just to show what's going on. You can add an annotation by right-clicking and, not surprisingly, choosing Add Annotation. And into this box which appears, I can type anything I like. I must admit I never quite know what to type in annotations, so I'm going to type package to import data. If I then click off that, I'm going to drag it up towards the top of my diagram, and it can nestle there and look impressive, I hope. So I'm now ready to look at my data, and to go into the data flow tasks, the simplest thing to do is double click on my data flow task, which will import the countries into Excel. And what that will do is automatically take me into the data flow tab, ready to add separate individual tasks to this. Now there's three types of data flow tasks you can create. You can have sources, which are listed there. You can then transform data using the other transforms. And finally, you can create destinations, which is where the data ends up. Now, in this particular tutorial, I'm not going to have a transform. I'm just going to have a source and a destination. The source is going to be from SQL Server. Before I even start doing that, what I'm going to do is go over to Solution Explorer and go to Connection Managers and create a connection to the underlying database. It makes sense to do this as part of my project so that I can reuse this in other packages. I only really want to connect to my underlying database once and once only. To create a connection, I can right-click on Connection Managers and choose to create a new one. And the sort of connection I'm going to create is going to be OLEDB, which is ideal for connecting to SQL Server or Microsoft Access. But you can see there's an enormous choice there. I'm going to add that in. I'm then going to, for the purposes of this tutorial, delete the one which is appearing on screen and create a brand new connection. And what will happen is a very familiar looking dialog box will appear. Familiar if you've done any work with SQL Server. The first thing I need to do is choose my server. It's on my local host, so I can type a full stop for that and then type the name of what's called the named instance. I'm going to be using Windows Authentication, and I'm going to choose the database name as Movies because I'm actually importing data from the Movies database. Some people then click on the Test Connection button at this point to check that the connection is going to work. I've never actually had it fail at that point. Once you're able to select the database name from the list, it tends to work perfectly. So if I choose OK to confirm that, and then OK again, I've now got my connection ready to use. So I can now add my source saying where the data is coming from into my data flow task. Now at this point I could choose the source assistant, and there's nothing wrong with it, it's a perfectly respectable wizard. But I'm going to do things the hard way and add in an OLADB source manually. If you remember, OLADB is the best way of connecting to a SQL Server or Access database. So I can click on that and drag it where I want it to go. And what will happen is Visual Studio will create the data source and put a red cross next to it to show that there's something wrong with it. And if I let my mouse linger over it, the something wrong with it is that a connection manager hasn't been assigned. Give me a chance is what I always think at this point. So I'm going to rename that and call it Countries Table. And then I suppose I need to solve the problem. And I can do that by either double clicking on the icon on the left hand side or right clicking to change the properties of the task, and it will come up with a dialog box. It automatically assigns the connection I've created. Had there been more than one connection, I would have had to click on the drop arrow, but in this case, because there's only one connection manager I could possibly apply to this data source, Visual Studio does the work for me on my behalf. What I then need to do is choose which table or view I want to connect to. So I can click on the drop arrow and choose the countries table, TBL country. It's probably a good idea at this point to click on the preview button to show me what data is going to be imported. And as you can see, it imports up to the first 200 rows, or displays up to the first 200 rows. So I can choose OK, and the red icon to the right of that will disappear, showing me that I've successfully configured my data source. What I now need to do is configure my destination. And so to do that, I'm going to have to add a destination into my data flow. Before I do that though, I need to be able to connect to an Excel workbook. And at the moment, I haven't got any connection ready to do that. I could right-click on Connection Managers and add my connection in there. But that would make it globally available throughout my project, and it's likely that I'll only want to be able to use it for this individual package. So what I'm going to do instead is add it within my Connection Managers section at the bottom of this particular package. And I can do that by right-clicking on the Connection Managers and choosing to create a new connection. It isn't one of the 5 standard ones listed there, so I'm going to have to choose a more general option of New Connection and hope that I can find something relevant in the list. Sure enough, there's an Excel Connection Manager listed, so I can choose that from the list and click to add it in. The next thing it asks me to do is to choose a path where the Excel workbook is stored. So I can click on the Browse button, I can choose the folder and choose Open, but because I haven't typed in a file name, it won't proceed at this point. So I'm going to call my file List of Countries. Then I'll be able to choose the Open button, and it will automatically create the file path for me. If I then choose OK, I've configured my destination, or rather, the first part of it. Because while I've got an Excel Connection Manager at the bottom of the screen, what I don't have is the destination itself. I can add that in by going to the list of other destinations and dragging an Excel destination onto my Dataflow task. And once again, the red icon shows that I haven't yet assigned a connection to it. And once again, I think, give me a chance. I can rename that Excel destination. I'm going to call it Countries Workbook. And then I can change it by double-clicking on the icon. But before I do that, it's normally a good idea to link up or connect up all the bits of your Dataflow task. So at the moment I've got a source up at the top and I've got a destination at the bottom, but no arrow linking the two together. I can get that arrow by clicking on the source task and dragging the blue arrow onto the destination. If you're wondering what the red arrow was for, as we'll discover in a later tutorial, it's actually for bad or invalid data. But I'm going to assume everything works perfectly and all of the countries flow directly into the new Excel workbook. Now that I've done that, you can see the arrow joining the two bits of the data flow task together. I can double click on my destination and I can edit it. So it's using the Excel Connection Manager, which I've already created for this package. Again, had there been more than one, I would have had to choose the one I wanted to use from a list. I can now choose what I'm going to call my Excel sheet. but when I click on the drop arrow, it says no tables or views could be loaded. And that's because this Excel workbook doesn't actually exist yet. So what I can do is click on the new button to the right of that, and it will generate script. When I run that script by clicking on the OK button, I can automatically choose the name of the new worksheet in the workbook, and it will automatically create it. Before I choose OK, I'm now going to go to Mappings and work out which column in the source is going to go to which column in the data. And you can see on the left hand side are my input columns from the source table, and on the right hand side are the destination columns in the Excel workbook. And this is one of those occasions where I don't need to make any changes at all, because they will all map up as things stand. So I can just choose OK. I've got a little star to the right of this package. What I'll do now is to save it, and you'll see the star disappears. A star is Visual Studio's way of showing something hasn't been saved. So I've got my control flow consisting of my two tasks, and the data flow task subdivides itself into two separate stages, a source and a destination. And I think I'm now ready to try running my package to see if it actually does what it should do. So to do that, I'll go back to the control flow task so I can see what's going on. And one way to run a package is to go to Solution Explorer, to right click on the package and choose Execute Package. And what that will do is run the package, import the data into the Excel workbook, and you'll see that happening on screen. So when I click on that, what it will do is save any outstanding work, it will build it to make sure everything makes sense, and then it will run it. So if I do that now, you'll see little green ticks will appear next to each successful task. So at the moment it's running my first task, and that's what that rotating amber symbol means. It's displayed the message saying about to import data, which is part of the script. When I choose OK, it will move on to the second task and immediately run it. And the green ticks show that everything worked successfully. What I should now get into the habit of doing is to stop execution. And by far the easiest way to do that is to click on this link at the bottom of the screen, which says Package execution completed with success. Click here to switch to design mode or select Stop Debugging from the debug menu. So if I click on that, the green text will disappear and I've finished executing my package. So let's see if it actually worked. If I go into Excel, I'm choosing Excel 2010 here, and if I choose to open up a file, in the folder I chose, you can see it's created a workbook called List of Countries. And if I double click on that, you can see it's imported the country ID and the country name. So it's worked. I'll just close that down. I'll just show running this a completely different way, or at least with a different perspective, by starting with the Data Flow tab selected. I can run it the same way, so I can right click on the package and choose to execute it. And this time you'll see the green text next to the successful data flow tasks. So you can either monitor a package in control flow view or in data flow view. And this time I'm going to stop the package running by choosing debug from the menu and choosing stop debugging. And you could see I could have pressed Shift F5 to do the same thing. So I've created a package, I've created two control flow tasks. For the second control flow task, I've subdivided it into a source and a destination, and I've run my package to create an Excel workbook. If you've enjoyed this tutorial, you'll find many more online Microsoft training tutorials at www.wiseowl.co.uk.